entire Eyewitness News team happening. And now, as Adrian Peterson's sponsors continue to fall like the autumn leaves, as always, an honor to share your screen with the host of Outside the Lines, which follows us nightly at this hour, Bob Lee. Robert?
I'll tell you what, Keith, with this NFL crisis now entering its second week, what's the one group we really have not heard from in this debate?
Well, there was a 14-word statement from the National Football League today, but other than that, it's been radio silence out of all the guys who wear ties.
And 32 owners as well, as we'll look at that ahead today, Outside the Lines.
Is not a decision made by the NFL. The decision to play Adrian again is made by this organization. We feel that this was the best decision for our organization.
You know, the decision made yesterday was made based on the information that was gathered, things that we looked at and talked about, and then it was made in the best interest of this football team.
Does Ray Rice being terminated, does that change the environment at all for McDonald?
We've been very clear on how we're approaching the situation.
So at the critical moments on the major decisions in these player discipline cases, at the crux of crisis for the NFL, the owners of these respective teams have left the explanations and hard questions to their employees, at most speaking selectively themselves about why their teams are in these positions.
Don't you regret at that time saying, boy, that looks bad?
Yes, but again, do I feel, yeah, that's my fault, because we love Ray, so we have a tendency to hear what we want to hear and see what we want to see.
And now, reporting for Outside the Lines, Bob Lee.
The dimensions of this NFL crisis measured now by the league's ongoing hiring spree. Yesterday, promoting a female executive and also hiring 3 senior advisors, all women, versed in the issues of domestic violence and sexual assault. And today, in the face of polling numbers suggesting the NFL did not fully pursue the Ray Rice matter, that Roger Goodell was not truthful, and with a growing number of senators and congresspeople talking about hearings and expressing displeasure, the NFL hired another woman, Cynthia Hogan. She will run the league's Washington, D.C. office to be their chief lobbyist on Capitol Hill. Unlike many American corporations currently, headcount is apparently not an issue for the NFL. The game day headcount for the NFL team's 46 players. The Minnesota Vikings said yesterday Adrian Peterson will be there this week and going forward, despite Peterson's felony indictment for child abuse and despite the team's knowledge of an incident from last year which only became public last night, that Peterson was alleged by the mother of another of his children to have injured that 4-year-old while disciplining him. No criminal investigation, no charges resulting as well. So after the team laid out its reasoning yesterday, a rare public appearance by GM Rick Spielman, the Vikings confronting the backwash of that news, and today a call from Minnesota Governor Mark Dayton calling on the Vikings to bench Peterson. Dayton described Peterson's action as a, quote, public embarrassment. And the gentleman you are watching is Ben Gessling, ESPN.com's Vikings reporter. Given all those facts, Ben, and also the Anheuser-Busch news, which you've just seen reported on Keith's show, we'll get to in a second. Radisson pulling out as well. We'll talk about that. What is really the temperature of the air different today from yesterday there?
Well, it's quite a bit higher. I mean, all of the fallout from sponsors had not happened by this point yesterday, and Radisson obviously was the first one. We've heard from a few others today. The Vikings also had a charity event scheduled this afternoon with one of their longtime charity partners, which was a house in Minneapolis that helps kids that have dealt with child abuse. They had to cancel that today as well. So there have been a lot of dominoes coming here today that make this issue much bigger than just a football thing, or at least an issue that was in the confines of the football team as it was yesterday. We've seen this reach out a lot farther into the community. We've heard from Mark Dayton. We've heard from Al Franken. There is a lot more pressure now from outside the Vikings organization for them to do something here, and we're going to have to see in the next probably 24 hours if they're going to react to any of that.
So Mark Dayton, the governor, who is up for re-election, but as you were telling me just before the program, a huge proponent in that very fierce battle to get public money for a new Viking stadium, and he was behind the team. He calls Adrian Peterson's conduct, essentially calling the player a public embarrassment. How has that resonated?
Well, it's certainly gotten people's attention. I mean, you hear from people saying, yeah, he's up for re-election, it's a political ploy, you hear all of that, but it is important to note, like you said, that Mark Dayton was out in the front of a very long, very difficult battle to get public funding passed for this new stadium. And then when the initial funding mechanism didn't come through, he went back to the legislature again to come up with another method to get the stadium funded. So he has been a faithful partner of the Vikings in this. At the groundbreaking last November, he was shoulder to shoulder with Ziggy Wilf, throwing dirt in the air, celebrating the groundbreaking of this new stadium. So the fact that he is up for re-election and the fact that he's now starting to distance himself from the team a little bit is interesting, in the sense that he has been such a faithful partner of the Vikings. Now you're getting to a point where he may have to rethink that a little bit, or at least put some pressure on them to do something different to help with his end of that partnership.
We have a statement from Ziggy Wilf. Any indication the owners will speak publicly? They put out the GM Rick Spielman yesterday.
There hasn't been any indication of that yet, and they very rarely will speak publicly beyond issuing a statement. Their MO has been to have Rick Spielman do a lot of the public statements and do a lot of the press conferences like that. They've even had coaches do that in the past. We heard from Mike Zimmer a little bit yesterday, and we heard from Leslie Frazier in a few of these instances in the past. So the Wilfs very rarely make public appearances. I think the last time we saw them speak publicly was to issue a statement very briefly when they fired Leslie Frazier last December. But it's pretty rare to hear from them. If we do, it certainly will be an indicator that this has gotten to a threshold to merit an appearance from them.
And some would say they're already at that point. Ben Gessling, ESPN.com, covering the Vikings, and that means he's on call 24/7. Thanks so much. Yesterday, when Rick Spielman was explaining why Adrian Peterson would continue to play, he stood in front of the usual NFL team-sponsored backdrop, in this case, Radisson. Last night, Radisson announcing it is, quote, suspending what it says is its partnership with the NFL franchise. Let's turn to ESPN Sports business reporter Darren Ravel. Darren, obviously follow the money. That's the mantra. As you well know and reported a couple hours ago, Anheuser-Busch, billion-dollar NFL partner. We are disappointed and increasingly concerned by the recent incidents that have overshadowed this NFL season. We are not yet satisfied with the league's handling of behaviors that so clearly go against our company culture and moral code. We have shared our concerns and our expectations with the league. The league responding, saying we are taking action. There will be much more to come. The AB announcement, how big is this?
It's much bigger than Radisson, a small sponsor of the team, basically suspending. I mean, this is $200 million a year. This is the exclusive advertiser for the TV broadcast of the Super Bowl for the last 28 years. This is $15 billion a year in sales, Anheuser-Busch. This is a salvo that they waited for. I'm told they did not want to make a statement, but it came to a point that they had to, and when they did it hard.
They could have done it privately. What do they gain by doing it publicly?
I think they gain people on their side. I mean, at some point, you just can't wait. And I think it got to that point where they could no longer wait.
What are the calculations that all the major sponsors, either at the team level or at the league level, what are they weighing right now over the last week?
Right. So what they're weighing is the positive of if they decide to part ways, and if there's a positive associated with that, and does that outweigh the association with the positive of having the association with the NFL? Right now, even though we just saw that statement from Anheuser-Busch, right now the math is telling us, since no one has dropped at the national and even at the local level, that they like the NFL partnership more than possibly making a statement at this point.
All right, this is a sternly worded statement from Anheuser-Busch. What could be their next step, short of pulling or amending commercials?
Well, if there's any next step, you would think it would have to be some sort of show of we're not there with you. Would it be a Gatorade that for PepsiCo, which also issued a statement last week that was a little bit stronger than people expected? Would it be that Gatorade is not on the sidelines and people notice that? Maybe some sort of statement that is made by people saying, whoa, they've pulled back even more, some sort of show. But short of that, I guess it would have to be a severing of the deal, or I don't know. I'm not sure we can imagine that, but I could have never imagined that Anheuser-Busch would make a statement like they did today.
If there are other dominoes that might fall, what might they be in the next 48, 72 hours?
I'm surprised that the Minnesota Vikings have not had another press conference to undo what they did yesterday.
And what did they do yesterday?
Saying that Adrian Peterson was going to play. I think the social discourse, and again, we have to be clear, and hopefully everything's not going to turn into a witch hunt here, but the Twitterverse and the social world out there did disagree strongly with the way that press conference was put on, and I do believe that it disagreed strongly with the Vikings' decision. Very quickly, the world in which you report, you have your contacts and sources. They look at the NFL. It's been a gold standard for decades, generations in the administration of sports. What's the reaction in the business community to the way this has gone down the last 9 days? I think it's disbelief. I think some of it comes from they never really had to deal with this. I think, you know, one person told me that they didn't learn anything from what happened with concussions. They are truly in a crisis that they've never had to deal with before. And yet, at the same time, Bob, the business is as robust as ever. Each team's going to make $150 million in TV rights this year. We had 22.2 million people watching Sunday Night Football, the highest rating for a primetime Sunday game for a game played on the West Coast. So it's a little bit strange how you have a business crisis and it's not affecting business yet.
Say it's not mattering yet at this point to the American public, just to the chattering classes. Darren Ravel, thank you very much. So the question is, will the men who own the teams also own this crisis and controversy? With the NFL appearing to be the Balkans, with teams all over the map on player discipline and no public indication the league is setting a policy on the 3 current cases, where have the owners been? Well, the owners of the 4 outstanding cases, Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson, Greg Hardy, nor Ray McDonald, has addressed a press conference on this issue.
Our organization speaks as one voice, so whether it's Trent, whether it's Jim, whether it's me, whether it's a statement that we put out, I mean, we speak with one voice.
We love Ray, so we have a tendency to hear what we want to hear and see what we want to see.
In Charlotte, Panthers owner Jerry Richardson, at an appearance, made his emotional remarks, professing empathy on the issue of domestic violence, even as the team was preparing to allow Greg Hardy to play. The Panthers, at the last possible moment, reversed course Sunday morning, and they left Coach Ron Rivera to explain it all.
At the end of the day, I had to make the decision that was in the best interest of the Panthers, okay? Understand that, guys. This is a very difficult situation that the league is dealing with right now. Teams are dealing with this, and we're doing the best we can, okay? We're not infallible. We make mistakes. But the decision I made today was based on all the information that I tried to get, the people that I talk with, and then going forward.
The Vikings, upon learning of Adrian Peterson's indictment, deactivated him for this past Sunday. But yesterday, even knowing of the allegation against Peterson from last year, they sent GM Rick Spielman to explain why Peterson will play going forward.
Yeah, I understand this is a very difficult thing to handle. But we feel strongly as an organization that this is disciplining in a child. And whether it's an abusive situation or not, or whether he went too far disciplining, we feel very strongly that that is the court's decision to make. But we also understand the seriousness of abusing children as well.
The 49ers' Ray McDonald, arrested but not yet officially charged with domestic violence, played on Sunday, and the only team official to answer questions about that was head coach Jim Harbaugh.
Rice being terminated, does that change the environment at all for McDonald?
We've been very clear on how we're approaching the situation, what's determining facts, what facts will determine, and information will determine, and the principles.
Have you seen the Ray Rice video?
I've answered your question.
And the protracted drama of Ray Rice's initial suspension, the release of the second videotape, and Rice's subsequent release and league suspension, only the Ravens head coach John Harbaugh has been at a press conference.
We had a chance, after seeing something this morning, seeing the video this morning, we had a chance to get together with Steve, Dick, Ozzie, and myself, and we had a meeting. It was not a long meeting, and we came to the decision that we came to release Ray.
Teams pursuing different approaches, and the 32 men who employ Roger Goodell issue some statements of support. But on the specifics of these teams, these owners, these cases, the owners are just largely not seen. Let's talk with Jamel Hill, whom you enjoy on Numbers Never Lie, ESPN NFL business analyst Andrew Brandt, and a corporate crisis communications expert. We say good evening to Carreen Winters. Andrew, if I ask you the question, where are the owners? How fair a question is that, and what is the answer?
It's a fair question. What we're seeing, Bob, is kind of the interplay between teams and league that we really haven't seen, the curtains being pulled back. A lot of these owners want to defer to the commissioner. Part of his role, part of his $40 million salary, is to take the heat on these things, deflect it from the owners. But now it's a different time. What we're seeing in the past couple of weeks, Bob, since the Ray Rice video, is there's so much focus here. These are C-level decisions. This is not for John Harbaugh to answer questions about Ray Rice along with Marshall Yanda's playing status on Thursday. This is not for Ron Rivera. This is not for Rick Spielman. These are ownership decisions. These are major decisions about who's going to play. What do they stand for? What's their moral integrity here? They need to be out there. And yes, they support Roger Goodell, and yes, they want to defer to him for these big-time issues.
But we haven't
right
heard
now,
from
these
him.
are team issues.
And we haven't heard from Roger Goodell either.
We haven't heard from Goodell neither, and that independent investigation continues. We need to hear from the owners while that goes on.
All right, Carreen, how far out of the tube is all this toothpaste, and can anybody get it back in for the NFL?
The toothpaste is definitely out of the tube, Bob. I think the question everyone has is, does the NFL support or turn a blind eye to a culture of violence, particularly a culture of violence against women and now children? And on the question about the owners, I think if you're an owner, you're probably trying to let this play out just a little bit. And as the public reacts to the NFL, I think that it's a dangerous proposition, because the hope is that the fans will still love their team but hate the NFL. But at the end of the day, half of that audience is women. More women watch the Super Bowl than the Emmys and the Oscars combined. And I think it's a dangerous proposition to sit quietly and hope no one asks you a question.
Jamel, the question of NFL leadership, what have you seen over the last 9 days?
Well, I haven't really seen any leadership, and that's been a really big problem. You brought up a good point. Why are you sending out Rick Spielman or John Harbaugh or coaches or GMs, people who really this isn't within their job? You know, the owners, it's funny when it's time to take credit for certain parts of the organization. They're more than willing to get out there in front of the camera, but now that there's real questions, real issues to be dealt with, they are largely silent. And they seemed to want to do this on their own terms. You look at Steve Bisciotti, he said that the reason that he didn't have a press conference was because he would have been too emotional. Are you kidding me? This is what you get paid to do. This is why you bought this team. You're supposed to be the face of the franchise, and the fact that they have willingly become invisible, I think in part to make sure that Roger Goodell continues to maintain his role as the Wicked Witch, so to speak. I think it says a lot about how these owners still don't get it.
Andrew, let's talk about the dynamics. And obviously, it varies from team to team, but you've got a very successful business person by definition. If they own an NFL team, they're a billionaire. These teams are all basically billion-dollar properties. What's the dynamic here and between senior staff and an owner, and how differential are they, and how many teams can somebody walk and say, hey, boss, you've got to do something and do something now, and he'll listen?
Yeah, it does vary from team to team, and some are more involved with others. I think you've seen the genesis of all this is Ray Rice. He got a 2-game suspension for something we all know about now. Yes, and Steve Bisciotti sent his 2 top senior executives to meet with Roger Goodell along with Ray Rice, an investment of political capital and human resources that obviously had an impact. We're talking about relationships. We're talking about a political environment that people are frustrated with. They want to see more. When you talk about senior management, sure, Rick Spielman is talking to ownership, and John Harbaugh is, and Ron Rivera is, but ultimately, they should not be there. And I think if there are terminations of these players, we will see the owner. The question is, while they're playing, are they going to speak as well? That's really yet to be seen. Signature player of the franchise, and Adrian Peterson, most important player in the past 10 years to that team, under investigation for all these things, and we don't see the owner for that. I think we should.
League-wide, Carreen, what's the tipping point here?
I think we're starting to see it. As you see advertisers pull away, and as it starts to hit the owners in their wallets, I think that's when you'll start to see action. I think we've heard some hints today that we should expect action beyond the hiring of some women into positions at the NFL. So I'll be interested to see what that action really is.
TV ratings, though, we just heard Jamel, Darren talking about great Thursday night game, Boffo numbers on CBS. NBC trumpeting great numbers they had on Sunday evening. No shows, no appreciable blip up there. Is this just mattering to a select part of the intelligentsia and nobody else?
I think it matters to a lot of people. The problem is that in sports, we have this learned behavior of learning to compartmentalize. I mean, we do it not just with sports, but with entertainers too. Certainly, there have been a number of entertainers who have been in trouble, but you've seen their movies maybe skyrocket at the box office. And it's interesting to me because fans practice this cognitive dissonance in the sense that they look to the media and they look to politicians and they look outside for people to make something happen, when the truth of the matter is they're the ones with all the power. I mean, the fans, if they really want to see ownership make actual and real changes, systemic changes in terms of domestic violence or any violence toward women, if they stop going to the games, if you're willing to cut off the TV, then yeah, that's what usually makes those things work. Part of it is advertisers, but part of it is the fans feeling as if the product turns them off. And the fans, quite honestly, given what we've seen with the attendance, with the TV ratings, they are not even close to being there.
I mentioned at the top of the show, Andrew, about the spate of hirings, women, 5 of them in the last day for the NFL. Certainly well-intentioned, not going to question that at all. Certainly needed for this issue, but rather transparent what they're attempting to do. Roger Goodell has not been seen publicly except for the interview on CBS. If you were in a position to advise the league and get in Roger's ear, where would you put him? How would you put him out there? Should he be out there?
I think so. I mean, I think hiding behind the investigation is one thing, but he can come out and, again, this sounds a little Dr. Phil-ish, but I think he needs to show a more human side. I've seen it. I've seen him handle players that have had personal discipline problems, and he's reached out, he's asked for their number, he's visited them. There's a side there that he could show some personal vulnerability in this with making mistakes that I think would resonate with the audience. They've done a lot of hiring.
A checker
They're trying
speech,
to do what
you
they
mean?
can.
A checker speech.
I think something to that effect, something that will resonate with so many fans that are wondering what is going on. There's arbitrary discipline, and no one seems to be steering the ship right now.
And as we said, the teams pursuing their various policies. Wish we had more time. We're going to be talking about this a great deal more. Jamel, Andrew, Carreen, thanks for joining us today Outside the Lines. We deeply appreciate it. Facebook is where you can continue the conversation on our page. Follow me on Twitter at Bob Lee ESPN. Go to iTunes. Subscribe to our podcast and listen to OTL anytime, anywhere. We'll be right back.